IVM.
Welcome to Policy Chowki, a special limited series on your favorite public policy podcast, All Things Policy. This series will take you behind the khaki uniform, beyond the flashing red beacon, and into the heart of the functioning of the Indian police force. We cast a critical eye on the role and function of the police in the Indian democracy, from the silent persistence of paperwork and meticulous investigation to risky counterterrorism efforts and policing in conflict zones. We explore the need for police reform and accountability in the system. Each episode brings you a comprehensive exploration of a unique facet of policing, illuminated by the insights of a former IPS officer who has lived the life behind the badge. So join us every Monday morning as we take you into the complex world of Policy Chowki.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Policy Chowki. I'm your host, Shrikrisnna Upadhyaya. In today's episode, we'll be delving into the world of forensic science and its intersection with the law. We'll be exploring how the scientific discipline aids our police forces in solving crimes and gathering evidence to prosecute criminals. As we delve into this fascinating subject, we'll also look at some key questions concerning the importance of a fair trial, the role of robust evidence, the current state of our forensic capabilities, and the challenging legal landscape around the admissibility of forensic evidence. We have a special guest on the show today, Dr. G.K. Goswami. Dr. Goswami is an IPS officer and is currently serving as the founder director of Uttar Pradesh State Institute of Forensic Sciences. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Goswami, and happy to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Srikant.
And also we have a regular guest on the show, Mr. Javeed Ahmad. He's a former IPS officer and has served as the DGP of Uttar Pradesh. So welcome back to Policy Chowki, Mr. Ahmad.
Yeah, good morning and welcome to Dr. Goswami, a very dear colleague from my years in the police. Shri, and let me say that Dr. Goswami is one of very few serving officers in the country who has such a deep understanding of the forensic science discipline and how it is to be used for the purposes of better investigation and better delivery of justice. So welcome, GK, from my side as well.
Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me for this purpose.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us again. And I have very little idea about forensics, so I'm looking forward to learn a lot from this conversation. But before we begin on forensics, I want to spend a little time, maybe a couple of minutes, just talking about our criminal justice system and the concept of fair trial, right? Now, fair trial is a part of person's right to liberty. No person can be condemned into prison without being accorded a fair trial. The onus is on the prosecution to prove that the accused has committed a crime beyond reasonable doubt. That is the standard. And the accused always gets the right to cross-examine the evidence which is being presented against him. So these are some of the basic principles upon which our criminal justice system elaborates. So Dr. Goswami, could you just take us through this again a little bit more in detail and talk about the crucial role that evidence plays in achieving the ends of justice in our system?
Yeah, well, you have highlighted the very important point, which is fair. And probably in all United Nations covenants and all regional treaties and conventions, fair trial has been given a lot of impetus. But as a police officer, serving in the state of Uttar Pradesh and CBI and many other exposures globally, I observed that until and unless we ensure that fair investigation is being done, evidence are properly collected, I think fair trial would be a utopian concept, meaning thereby that collection of evidence is the fulcrum of perfect justice. It is generally said that a judge delivers judgment, and it is the good luck of the parties involved if they get justice. And I complement this statement by stating that if a judgment of any court is sine qua non to justice, then probably there is no need to have the doctrine of appeals. That means when we have the system of appeal, it means we inherently believe that there are possibility of miscarriage of justice in any judgment. So I want to say here that until and unless we have the quality of evidence, particularly the neutrality of evidence, because we generally take care or we generally rest upon, have more faith on eyewitness, that is considered the primary witness. But in practice, if you see, there are a lot of, implanted witness, there are a lot of duress, there are a lot of personal vendetta, and so forth. So we cannot simply rely on oral testimony. That is why the neutrality of evidence is very important, and probably here comes the role of forensic science.
Right. I think that's a good segue into forensic science, the topic of today's discussion. So, from what I understand, whatever little I understand, the idea behind forensic science is that it is going to bring scientific rigor to methods of criminal investigation and evidence gathering, right? And it comes from several disciplines, say toxicology, pathology, DNA analysis, fingerprinting, ballistics, digital forensics, and much more. So, I want to know two things from you. One is that how has this field of forensic science evolved over time? And also, maybe you could spend a little bit time on talking about these different types of forensic evidence and make us understand the depth and the breadth of forensic science which is used in law enforcement today.
Yeah, well, probably if you look back, the historical perspective of forensic science, how it was used. So there are so many instances, but which is considered well founded is the death of Julius Caesar when he was killed before Christ, nearly 40 years earlier. Then the medical legal was first conducted on her dead body, on his dead body. And it was found that there were 23 injuries on her body. And the medical legal expert doctor suggested that chest injury is lethal. And here from lot of development do happen. There were fingerprint, and there is a saying that probably it was the fingerprint were being invented by two policemen in Kolkata at that time at the British route. But it is debatable. Is over the period of time, lot of like fingerprint, then ballistics, toxicology, chemistry, like serology, blood analysis, and many more. Of course, the turnaround came basically the DNA technology. Let me clarify one more thing here. That if we see what is the purpose of investigation or even the trial, if you say, the entire ambit for this whole exercise in the court of law or even by a police officer is basically correctly identifying a human being. But who is the person concerned? Be it a victim or on the other hand, it may be an accused. Let us see what about the victim. Said many a times, it may be a child who may not disclose his identity, maybe a dead body, maybe even face may be identifiable, but you may not connect the who is the person. Then dead body may be depleted, may be putrefied, sometimes you get bone. Meaning thereby that there are various reasons why you have to correctly identify the on the other side, even if a FIR is being made by a named accused. Still, the main work of investigation to collect evidence to identify that this is the man or this is the person who has actually commenced the offense. If it is a blind case, there is no clue, then even the work becomes more important. So, ultimate all the forensic science technology, whether it is say fingerprint is what? To connecting the person with the crime. Right. It may be DNA, it may be your voice sample, it may be any other thing. So somehow or other, the purpose is to connect human being with the crime. And there are so many technology. Of course, for human identification, if it is in person, like if you get some biological samples or all, then DNA had more credibility. It had more probability. That is why there is debate whether DNA is acceptable. There are few judgments where court accepted. Sometimes there are deviations also. So let me clarify here that no technique can be said even 100% correct.
Right.
This has to be taken care. So how to resolve this problem or this issue? There is always an error rate. So whenever you are dealing with any forensic report, then always look what is the error rate. And DNA is so far has the minimum error rate in the entire ambit of forensic science. That is why it is considered to be the most reliable among all the techniques.
Right. Mr. Ahmad, you've served as the director of National Institute of Criminology and Forensic Science. So what has been your experience like? Would you like to add something to what Dr. Goswami said and share from your experience as to how forensics has evolved in the country as far as law enforcement is concerned?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Yes, sir. I think you were speaking something.
To add to what Dr. Goswami said, let me go back and talk about the presumption on which the Indian Evidence Act has been framed. The presumption is A, that anyone who has seen or heard about any crime will dutifully, correctly, and promptly relate that before a court of law. That is the basic presumption on which the whole Indian Evidence Act is based. In fact, the law casts a duty on all citizens of this country to depose before a court about what they have seen or heard about a crime. That is the legal position. That is the legal presumption and the duty. Whereas in reality, as active police officers, I have seen, and I'm sure GK would second me on that, that more often than not, those who are actually witness to a crime or have heard about a crime, for reasons which are many, shy away from appearing before the court. So, and the result is that those who actually appear before the court are often, not always, but in a substantial number of cases, are people who are either motivated to give a statement or have incorrect or incomplete information but still come forward. That is the reason why in India the conviction rates are so abysmal.
Right.
One of the reasons is that obviously the other reason is the poor investigation, but the another important reason is the unreliability of those who are put up as witnesses. Now, given this background, forensic science, which is an objective science, which deals in objective realities rather than opinions, has the potential and the promise to present before the court the real situation, the mute facts, which have been culled out through the technology that is now available, whether it is DNA today or it was fingerprint in the yesteryears. So that is why forensic science is important, because of its objectivity, because of the fact that it is mute, that it does not give an opinion, it just presents a fact. That is why forensic science is important. And that is why forensic science is important for the real implementation and practice of the rule of law. That is why justice will be done when those who are actually, who have actually committed a crime are indicted, rather than someone who's been framed through witnesses who have an axe to grind. And that is the necessity why forensic science needs to be increasingly adopted by the investigators and appreciated by the courts. Let me clarify this last phrase. Unfortunately, the courts have been slightly slow in understanding and appreciating the changes in technology and in forensic science, and therefore this gap needs to be filled up as quickly as possible.
Right.
Yes, sir, you have very truly raised the issue, but I just want to add a few points actually, sir. We as police officer and as a member of society, we generally bother and we are more concerned about the conviction rate. But as a student of law and forensic science, during my recent exposure in US during Fulbright Fellowship, I worked with the Innocence Project, sir. And I want to highlight few things here. Basically, sir, if we generally consider that US system may be the best, of course, they have very good technology and all. But nearly 94% conviction in United States are based upon, number one, the confession. And confession before police in United States is admissible. Of course, with the rider of explaining Miranda warnings before that, right? That is point one. Second, if it is not confession, then plea bargaining. And mind the situation that there are thousands and thousands of cases where people were not only convicted, but hundreds and hundreds were wrongly executed. I just cite you one case, which is very prominent case of as old as 1661, Campbell Wonder case. Not taking much of time, the crux of the case was that a gentleman of age about 70, Mr. William, he went to collect rent in the nearby village near London. He did not turn up in the evening and it was slightly delayed. Then worried wife sent her servant of age about 12 named Perry. He also did not turn up. Ultimately, later it was found in the night that his scarf, muffler, and hat had some red color, considering that it was blood. And in the morning, Perry came, and somehow it was felt that he has killed or he has done something wrong with the old man. Finally, it was concluded by police and by judiciary that he, at the age of 12, his brother, age of 14, and mother, they have killed the person. And they were being convicted and hanged very fast, about in 1 year or so. Later, after 1.5 years, William turned at home. So this brought a very important doctrine called corpus delicti. That means when you are thinking that a person is missing, at least try to find out the body. Meaning thereby, it is not a single case. There are thousands and thousands cases, and during this Fulbright fellowship, I got opportunity of interacting 12 people who were on death row, and one was of 32 years. And his execution was, lined up thrice, but because of some procedural, because he had life, so, and ultimately DNA technology proved him as an innocent guy. Here, I want to just highlight that as a police officer and a member of society, our concern remains more on conviction. But I am equally concerned that not even a single person of innocence should be convicted. Not even convicted. They should not be faced if we have the ideal situation. So I think we have to have a balance between the right and wrong. That is my point. And here, and I tell you one more story with this. In fact, DNA, how DNA came into system. That's a very interesting story. 2 adolescent girls were killed. That is last part. But when Alex Jeffrey in 1984 invented DNA fingerprinting, it had no business with crime or any court system. Okay. His purpose was just to connect the progeny with the parents, just to have the pedigree to establish genetically. And on 10th September, he got this result. So he called it Eureka Movement. And connecting or identification was actually fingerprint. And he coined the term DNA fingerprinting, means identification of human being through DNA. And this research got a lot of impetus globally, lot of recognition, and people appreciated a lot. Then the next important point in the DNA, because DNA is very important, that's why I thought that this story should be known to the common man. Okay, so there was one dispute of immigration in London, and of course this research was done in London only, in Leicester University, by Professor Alex Jeffrey. And the case of immigration was that a minor child of 3-4-year-old was to be immigrated. His mother was already living as citizen in London at that point of time, and she wanted to bring that boy, toddler, to London. Immigration authority thought that probably it is a disguise, may not belong to the child does not belong to her, and this was the dispute. When this research came into existence, publicity was there. The lawyer of immigration lady requested the authorities that Alex Jeffrey has brought this technology to connect parents with child. Can we use that? They accepted this offer, and Alex collected the sample of mother and child. And the result was that they were genetically linked. And he said, and this is very important for all of us who are connected with justice, he said that when authority accepted this fact that the child belonged to mother, the gratitude in the eyes of mother, he said, and he writes in his autobiography, best reward for his research. So I always say, whether it is a policeman, whether a judge or anybody, that if you are really delivering justice, nothing can be better than this attribute of society to anybody. Then this was the second, milestone in the annals of DNA. And third was in 1986. 2 adolescent girls, they were being killed in 1983 and 1986 in separate events. Both cases, the girls were of about age 13, 14, and the distance of both incidents were almost stone throw, 30, 40 meters only, right? And both cases were blind. There was no key. David Baker was the detective. He actually had suspicion on one person called Richard Buckland at that point of time, having age around 17, having some speech impairment also. Somehow or other, God knows better why, he accepted to commit the second crime of 1986. He was placed before the court. In primary discussion or examination, court thought that he may not be involved, but the doubt or the cloud of doubt is still remains. At this point of time, a backer thought that let me meet Alex Jeffrey to him. And here he accepted this challenge. But the real challenge was that when they identified or they shortlisted the potential rapists in that particular area, the number was more than 5,000. So it was the matter of the budget because it needs to still today also we sometimes say, oh, how can we conduct DNA in all cases because a lot of budget is involved. But think on those days, the technology was not even in existence. But this matter went up to the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And especially the British Parliament sanctioned the special budget. Now, the project was taken up. First of all, the blood sample of Richard Buckland was collected. And mind it, he was proved innocence. So DNA first actually established innocence of a person beyond any doubt. Right. So this was the first case how DNA spectacularly entered into courtroom, proving the innocence of a person. Of course, later another story is also very important. 6 months samples were collected. Nearly 5,000 people were examined. They were screened, but no clue, nothing was matched. But important event happened here. In the evening, at a pub, two persons were talking. One name was Jan Kelly. He disclosed a fact to his friend sitting behind that one of my friends, he requested me to impersonify in his name to give blood sample in this whole dragnet process of DNA. Okay. And he successfully gave the blood in the name of Colin Pitchfork, that fellow who was actually the culprit found later. This whispering was overheard, communicated to police. Police caught Jan Kelly, reached to hold this Peter Pitchfork, and rest is the story. He was found involved through DNA in both the cases. So here my take is that we should always bother about that no wrong person. Wrongly conviction is even, in my opinion, even more worse than acquittals. And at least in our country, heinous crime, I don't know what is the scenario because there is no study. But if America has this problem, UK has this problem, many other countries have this problem, then we cannot just wash our hand. So I think we have to think that we have to be neutral. Like we talk about forensic science as a neutral, concept or evidence. But first of all, we should be neutral as the agency. Our neutrality is also challenged. And I'm a police officer. I have no hesitation in accepting it. We generally, always when we get conviction, we always clap. But when we have acquittal, we more. And this should be the attitude. We should be professional first. Then we should find out that, and we should take oath that we will not implicate even a single person if we really want justice to be in place.
Yeah.
Yes,
thank
please.
you, Dr. Goswami, for those fascinating stories and fascinating insights. And I think what Mr. Ahmed said that, often we think of conviction rate as a metric of measuring the success of criminal justice system. But like you rightly pointed out, there are some limitations to using that metric, especially because, DNA technologies can go wrong. It can lead to false matches, or sometimes it may lead to other kinds of dubious practices such as implanting evidence and so on. But of course, DNA technology can aid criminal investigation, but it cannot substitute proper procedural police work and criminal investigation carried out by officers of the police. In any case, I want to get a bit more into these procedures in just a while. But before that, I have a question for you regarding the state capacity of forensic science in India, right? Because, state capacity is a problem with our entire government. When it comes to law enforcement agencies, it is no different. We often think of high-tech forensic labs as we see in medias, and we assume, tests are being conducted here, everything is hunky-dory. But I want to know from you, what is the actual, state of forensic infrastructure and capabilities in India? And maybe if you could share one or two stories from the Indian context as to how forensic science has come to the aid of police in investigating crimes.
Well, before taking up your question, I want to highlight one important point that by my talk, probably everybody may be thinking that, oh, it is a very rosy picture. Okay. This is one side of the story. Other side of the story is that if forensic science is in the bad hands, it can create a lot of havoc also.
Right.
So how to get the correct, expert opinion? I will just take 2 to 3 minutes here just to explain that what are the challenges actually in forensic science. And there are series of forensic fraud across the globe. I will come up after 2-3 minutes on forensic fraud also. That's also very important point before we enter into the state of affair in our country and the legal regime for forensic science and all. Right? You see, there are important points for integrity of the sample.
Right.
Because if we muddle with the sample at any stage, right from, of course, in general, we are very casual being a citizen of this country. Probably we are not being educated in this, that whenever any crime happens, we inadvertently went there and generally play, unknowingly so much havoc or so much damage to the scene of crime. But that is one part. Another is that because of ignorance by the police or any enforcement agency, if they do not know the proper way of, identification of the samples, then it's how to lift, how to store, how to label, how to transport, how to send it properly to the laboratory. So here, without taking much of time, not entering into very big complexity, the chain of custody is a doctrine, it is a procedure. Basically, until and unless we have a proper system of crime scene management, which is, I think, missing to greater extent. There may be some good officers, I'm not saying there are, but there is not a systematic approach for crime scene management. So we have to develop that. And the institute, we are just starting in our state. I'm the founder director, as you introduced me. We are trying to have collaboration with IIM Lucknow on this point to have some in-depth understanding how we can siege everything on crime scene so that no tampering, no manipulation can be done at any stage till it reaches to laboratory. Right? From laboratory itself, there are so many challenges. The accreditation is one. Then one question, I will connect this, quite interesting, with our legal framework. Section 45, I will tell you how the legal framework in India is. But Section 45 talk about expert. And here from the expert opinion enters in Indian Evidence Act. And precisely, Section 45 to 51 are the sections which are relevant in the Indian Evidence Act. That is one. Okay. So who is an expert? Unfortunately, law keep conspicuous silence on this point. They suppose somebody asks, and this question is generally being asked in our courtroom with an expert. And I generally talk when I deliver the lecture to the forensic expert. I ask that, can you answer who is an expert? Most of the time, because we generally do not educate them on this point. So this question is not answered even in legal system. But in Jalal case, Himachal Pradesh versus Jalal, 99 Supreme Court case. In this, court has lucidly explained this. Not entering into detail, but I just give, there are 2 points where, or based on which an expert can be explained. One is his or her education. So the court generally believes that if you are being selected in any laboratory, the minimum education should be there. Here, we have a problem. Many times we have seen that people who are actually conducting DNA do not have any formal education. And if somebody challenges this, then the definition of expert will be challenged, right? So this is point one. Even if those who are working in the laboratory, probably they should at least have some educational certification or educational degree if they are considered themselves as expert. That is point one. The another point here is experience. That means that there should be a system of developing experts. How much experience you have. And I always give this suggestion that normally what happens, we generally advertise post, and even any state or any central laboratory. We generally ask experience. But when from a new student, young student, or researcher can bring the experience. So I suggest, and not my opinion, globally people are doing it. So what they do, they recruit people, right? Even the fresh blood, but they attach them with the already existing expert who is a principal expert, and they will assistant expert. And after certain cases, they will be considered the primary or principal expert. So by this way, we can supplement this problem and we can augment the scarcity or the deficiency of manpower in our laboratory. Okay, so this is one. Now let me just give slides, exposure to forensic fraud. Forensic fraud, although it happens since ages, there is no doubt. But the glaring case I am telling, and generally we talk about US and UK very, high profile. I just cite few examples of United Kingdom. In Massachusetts, in 2000, there was a lady expert of drug analysis. She was very favorite of prosecution because she gave report in favor of prosecution, and based on that, prosecution was getting conviction in majority of cases, almost all cases. Okay, and she was doing it very fast. Okay, her colleagues were worried that how can she complete so many samples in a day or in a specified time. They were not even half of with the rest of their efforts. Okay. So ultimately, it was revealed that she was doing dry learning. Dry learning is a term basically where without conducting any forensic test, the report is being prepared. And this happens in various places. It is not only US. I don't say that, but until unless we have some check and balancing. Now the question comes, how to check and balance? Check and balance is that we should have some blind review. We should have some, say there are 200 reports prepared by an expert in a specified time. We should have a separate commission or separate identity who can, unanimously take 2 or 3 samples or reports. Which sample they should be sent to some other laboratory so that they should be cross-checked. And this system exists in most of the country. So we have to adopt this type of scenario. Okay.
Let me add here that even in India, there was a lady who, better not to name, who was doing narco tests in Bangalore, incidentally. And it was found at some stage that the narco test reports that she was generating had many flaws, and she was removed from that position. And a number of reports that she had generated obviously had to be redone and all that. So this is a problem. Yes.
So another important case I just cite in Houston. Peter Stout is my friend who came later, and now he's one of the best forensic expert. I visited his laboratory last year and stayed with him for about 8 days. His lab also faced the same problem in 2003, and for complete 6 years. And you see, in single stroke, there more than 21,000 cases, that were convicted. They were by single stroke by the mayor of the city. They were being cancelled. The conviction were overturned. You just see the scenario, right? But later, after 6 years, this Peter was brought, and now that lab has transformed how the best lab in the world. So I generally ask him that, can you tell me the journey how worst lab to best lab? And the worst lab is not given term. The New York Times actually on the front page it said the worst lab in the country. So this is the journey. Now I just cite one example of India for forensic fraud, and probably sir may recollect. I think sir was there in CBI, or probably he left by then. In the case name is Khurshid, Delhi, the state of Delhi versus Khurshid, very popular case of 2018. What happened in that case? That the child, it was a POCSO case. The child was of about 6 years old, and all evidence, medical, legal, and other circumstances, the last seen theory and all, they were frankly speaking that the accused is culprit. But because DNA was clean, DNA was actually exonerated him. There was no connectivity. Given DNA report, trial court brushed aside all the evidence, inculpatory evidence, and he was acquitted. This case came to High Court by the state appeal. Here, the court got doubt. The reason of the doubt was almost before the same bench in last 2 to 3 months. The same type of cases of POCSO in 3 cases, the scenario was same. And the DNA report was prepared by the same expert. So in Khurshid case, court got doubt. And then it was ordered that the sample of this case should be examined by different DNA expert. And when the report came, it was totally reversed. That means the accused was found involved. And when other 3 cases were re-examined by the order of the Honorable High Court of Delhi, the expert opinion was completely reversed. So then this case was referred to CBI, and rest is the story that charge sheet was. So my take here is that we have to be very, very cautious and careful. There are a lot of procedure, because until unless we have the procedural fairness,
Correct.
then forensic science can do havoc also. That we should be very so. And you told about the fruit of poisonous tree. Probably here also, if the procedure is not correct, basically understanding this doctrine of fruit of poisonous tree is very simple. Like you see, philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, means and end. Generally, in US or in India, let us see, we only believe on end. That whatever wrong methods you have used, if you have got some evidence which are inculpatory, let me explain inculpatory and exculpatory. Inculpatory is those evidence which actually prove guilt, and exculpatory are those evidence which prove your innocence. So you just bring any evidence by any mean which is inculpatory, court will accept. This is the status of us. Although the Law Commission has said that we should not adopt this procedure, but it's still Parliament to take a call. But in US and many other countries, they follow this doctrine. And if you have taken a wrong path or wrong means, then whatever good evidence, connecting evidence, inculpatory evidence you bring, it will have the zero value.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. So I think one of the foremost takeaway that I had is, a lot of forensic science actually hinges upon procedural fairness and procedural safeguards that are embedded into the system, which ensures that not only we catch the accused, but also we don't end up framing the innocent, right? So DNA as both inculpatory and exculpatory, like you put it, are equally important. But I want to go back to a comment which Mr. Ahmad made earlier, that, the courts in India have been generally slow to adopt these new kind of evidences which forensic science can bring, right? But in fact, I would argue that the legislature has been even slower in sort of legislating on these subjects and improving our criminal procedure code and our evidence law to include this kind of new evidence that can be presented before courts of law. I think recently in 2019, or I'm getting the year wrong, but I think there was a bill called Criminal Identification Bill, which finally inserted some provisions regarding voice sampling and so on in the CRPC. But other than that, there has been no change which has been made to CRPC or Evidence Act, and at least as far as I can recall in recent years. But in fact, the courts have taken action in accepting evidence which is being gathered through forensic methods, and in fact sometimes putting an end to certain evidence which was being used by the police to prove guilt of the accused. For example, in the famous case of Selvi versus Karnataka, the Supreme Court actually put an end to brain mapping and narco analysis because these methods were not scientific enough, and there was also the question of self-incrimination of the accused. So the larger point and the larger lesson in public policy that I want to draw is a lot of forensic science, or let's say evidence, hinges upon procedural fairness. And just a bit on the poison fruit doctrine that also you mentioned. The fact is, in the US, it matters equally how you collected the evidence as opposed to what the evidence is. Both has to be legal. However, in India, the position is reversed in the sense we only look at the evidence and we don't really bother about illegally obtained evidence, which means the police get actually a lot of leeway in collecting evidence. And this can also lead to adverse or perverse incentives for the police to muck around with cases and create evidence where there is none. So all this brings me to a larger question, which I want to pose to both of you, which is regarding in the light of forensic science and all these improvements in technology, what kind of procedural safeguards that we need to evolve as policy and in law so that the ends of justice are saved and the accused are not let go of the system while the innocent have a means of proving their innocence.
Yeah, well, your question is very well drafted and very well planned. Before entering to this question, let me just give you a little bit glimpse of how the legal regime or legal framework we have in India on forensic science, right? Forensic evidence. So as I already mentioned, we have two procedural law in place. One is Indian Evidence Act, 1872, right? And as I mentioned earlier, section 45 to 51. And if precisely you want to read, even 45 suffice the purpose. So these are the Evidence Act is applicable both for criminal law or criminal matters as well as civil matters. On the other hand, we have the Criminal Procedure Code, CRPC. So there are only 3 sections which are relevant and have some, imprint for handling DNA or handling this forensic evidence. One is 291, and it is very interesting to mention here. 291 talk about the medico-legal expert. And here, the very important point is that medico-legal expert is not considered a witness. He is considered a deponent. 292 talk about various, experts. Although in the list of 292, DNA, voice sample, many other technology are not there. There is a chemical examiner, explosives, fingerprint, and all. But 293 subsection 1 part A actually has a saving grace. It says that any other technique which is approved by the competent government. Okay, so here from we generally draw analogy and use DNA and many other technology. Right. So these are the 3 sections. Here I want to tell about the 291 deponent. I believe that expert opinion or the person expert should not be used as a witness because he is neutral, and he should be used as, or his status should be like a deponent, so that his opinion can be used as inculpatory for proving guilt, on the other hand as exculpatory to prove innocence. Because when you produce him as a PW, he somehow or other carry this opinion or his mindset, oh, I am for the prosecution. So I have to somehow or other, establish the prosecution story. So this needs a paradigm shift in our approach. I think he should be, because his opinion is neutral. How can he be part of prosecution? In my opinion, this is a paradox and should be done away with. Right? Then about DNA. DNA, only 2 sections are there. One is 53A, exclusively used only for the accused of rape. Technically speaking, 53 does not involve any other accused other than rape cases. Okay. So this section is very limited scope. Here, without any consent, you can take sample or you can medical examine. So 53A deals with 2 things: medical legal examination and collection of blood sample or any biological material for the purpose of DNA. On the other hand, for victim, we have 164A. And 164A, you have to take the explicit consent of the victim if major and his parents or legal guardian in case of minor for conducting medical legal as well as collecting DNA. So this is the only setup of legal, you can say, regime in India for handling this. But I understand that since last couple of years, the government has made a lot of effort through making committee, and now I think our both substantive law, that means IPC, as well as our procedural law, CRPC and Evidence Act, they are under overhaul. I think this needs a proper segment where we can develop a complete horizon how to handle and how to utilize different techniques and technology of forensic science. Here, I want to flag there are so many techniques in place. They are called junk science. And at the end, I will give few readings, those who have some interest to understand better what is the current status of forensic science. Say, for example, we generally believe right from our childhood that, oh, this fingerprint is, unsettled or it cannot be challenged. But the fact remains that there is no study, there is no empirical study globally which establishes that no two persons or the fingerprint of two persons can be identical. It is a presumption, as rightly mentioned, sir. And again, if it is a chance type of, fragmented fingerprint, you just cannot take up. Sometimes you say, oh, thoda sa mil gaya. It will not help you. It can only give you some kind of light. Based on that, you should not do it. And secondly, whatsoever a finger expert opinion it is always a corroborative evidence. It is a secondary evidence. Mind it can never be get the status of primary. So entirely you cannot depend, although there are cases where DNA, because if it is a credible evidence, there is no doubt about the procedure and all, then there are cases where based on DNA, convictions have been made. But the legal status of forensic science is corroborative in nature, secondary in nature. Okay, so this is very important status. Now let me come to the status of forensic science and laboratories in India. We have good quality, we have good education in India. Although there are, possibility of, giving them better exposure and all. The first thing which is very important for legal studies as well as forensic studies, and here is the catch. Forensic science is not a pure science like physics, chemistry, mathematics. It is an amalgamation. It is a blend science. It usually, even 45 section as I mentioned. The first thing is art. Science comes on number 2, B. If you see 45, first A part is art. That means anybody who can give any expertise through any art activity, that will also be considered. Language, law, expert of law is considered expert under 45. Expert of language is considered expert. So it is not only science, that is one. So this forensic science is a blend. It is blend of various, science and social science subjects, anthropology, right? So the point remains that we should have a proper understanding of who is an expert. That is point one. Then in our laboratory, basically, we should give in our forensic education, we should give exposure of law until unless the forensic expert are being given some terminology. And I generally give one example of my own experience. Like in the courtroom, there are normally 3 players, and you can take the fourth one also. One is the judge, the learned judge. Then second is our expert, and on other hand, it may be a defense lawyer or take it along with prosecution. Judge as well as lawyers, both. They know legal language. They do not understand the scientific language of forensic expert. On the other hand, the forensic expert does not know legal language, legal terminology. So when they interact, one is talking like in French, another is talking like in Russia. So this coordination is very important, and I'm trying since last couple of years just to bring these two disciplines together. So my opinion, and we are trying to establish this fact in our new institution, that until unless we give some exposure, I'm not saying that forensic expert should be a legal expert, but he should know how to withstand the court of law. So we are introducing moot court and other basic, precepts of law. On the other hand, again, Madam Sir had also mentioned that judges are slow and all. They have not been given any exposure most of the time. In very few institutes, probably have some exposure of forensic science to legal study. But until unless we have proper subject of forensic science in legal study, they will not appreciate. Okay. And we cannot blame only that judiciary is slow. See, the first part goes to the investigating officer. Who is stop you to do DNA? Who is stop you to collect forensic evidence? The point is that in the name of the independence, or you can say the investigating agency is free, nobody can challenge them whatsoever. I have a reservation on this also. You see, in foreign, especially US, the defense has parallel, provision of conducting investigation. Here, what defense has the provision? They have nothing. The moment any crime happens, police becomes automatically the owner of the scene of crime. Ultimately, what they do in defense, in collection of evidence, defense has no role. Why? If you say that there is a case, very interesting case, the defense was asking, the accused was asking, of course, that see, where the incident happened, there is a CCTV camera. Okay. So please direct the investigating officer to get the feedback because they are not listening. Honorable High Court said, no, we will not interfere in the investigation process. Here is some difference. In the interest of justice, because if he is involved, probably if he is involved, then that evidence will become interpretatory. Why we consider it will be exculpatory only? Have a very open mind if we are really dealing with justice with perfectness. We are delivering justice, but we don't know whether it is perfect or imperfect. So we have to have a very open mind, number one. Number two, we have good, institutes these days. A lot of institutes are coming. Of course, we have equally, deficiency or these vacancies in different laboratories and all. So I think we have to have a process. One, how to fill those posts and how to give experience to our, budding forensic experts, those who are coming from the universities and different educational institutions. So there should be a policy that how the experience and other requirements for the purpose of recruitment should be done. Because most of the time I am involved in teaching and interacting with students since last almost now it is 15 years. So a lot of students keep asking, what is your future? Where will we get job? Another point which I generally say that, like say if you are doing BA, you are doing simple BSc, you have so many chances to write exams. Like you can write bank exams, you can write civil service, you can go for UPSC and all. I think this forensic science should also be included in civil service examination. Because see, one thing, we should not limit the forensic examiners only to the courtroom. If we are limited to courtroom, then this problem is not going to solve. We have to expand the horizon. And one more thing, forensic is not only, see, when we are trying to translate the forensic science word for our university, for our institution. So I was struck with one very interesting thing. For forensic word, we have two terminology. One is न्यायालिक. So forensic science is termed न्यायालिक विज्ञान. So न्यायालिक is synonym to forensic. न्यायालिक means judicial. Judicial cannot be forensic. Another term is न्यायिक. न्यायिक is simply legal. So legal science. Legal science cannot be forensic. So in my opinion, I have met so many Hindi experts, those who are stalwart, but still we are struggling to find out the correct terminology in Hindi for forensic science. So this is the status how forensic science needs a lot of research and development, not only for technology, but for understanding. Now, another area, say for example, banking. We are developing here banking forensics. Every bank is flooded with a lot of fraud, of the signature, the fingerprints, and so many things. I think we are trying actually to widen the horizon of forensic science beyond courtroom. Courtroom is just very small part. Every procedure, basically, what is forensic science? Forensic science is to prove probability of anything, especially probability of procedure. And if you utilize and expand the horizon of this science, it will do wonder for the society. Suppose if A plus B is equal to C, so you have to prove it. So the way you are proving it, probability, it is nothing but forensic science. It is nothing but logic. So I believe that forensic science is closer to the logic. It is closer to the probability, and that is how we should look at. And we are trying to bring this institute on this line, so that we are developing this institute in three formats. One is crime scene management. The another vertical of this institute is, of course, the laboratory and its parallel. And third, which is unique, I can tell you that no one at the globe has this third, because I have good exposure in United Nations and all last couple of years. The third one is how to translate expert opinion into credible evidence. Let me clarify what I need to say. Basically, the forensic expert gives forensic opinion, not an evidence. It is a job of the investigating agency to connect with the circumstances, whether it is inculpatory, whether it's exculpatory, whether it is relevance for the case or not. What we do, because we are ignorant as police officer many a times, especially our downline staff who is actually handling the case, they generally write you, today this report has been received and now it is attached here. So without writing anything, we generally send it right there in the court. And because we have ignorance, and so is with the other agency. So in my opinion, just thinking that judges are very slow and they are not stopping us, number one. I think we should train all the stakeholders. It is not only police. I don't say that if we train police, that will going to solve. We have to train police, we have to train prosecutors, we have to train defense lawyers through, of course, through their legal education and all. And then our fourth one is the judiciary. And judiciary, all levels. I have seen many cases because I get opportunity to review forensic science, those judgments of High Court and Supreme Court where the forensic science is involved. There is one book which is very prominent and being published under the eyes of Honorable Chief Justice of India. That is called Indian Survey of Annual Survey of Indian Law. It is being published by Indian Institute of Law, and it is annual feature. So since 2013, I am writing on forensic law, and that was being given by the Supreme Court, that task through ILI. But I have observed that there are so many misunderstanding, misconception about interpretation of forensic science, and that needs a clarity and education at all level. Thank you.
Just to add to what Dr. Goswami has said, when I was heading the National Institute of Criminology and Forensic Science, 2017, I had a meeting with a 2-day seminar with all the heads of all the labs, forensic labs of the country. And after the 2-day seminar, I asked those heads of the labs to self-assess on various parameters their preparedness and their capability for future of forensic science in their labs. And the overall assessment of the heads of labs across the country in 2017 was that on a scale of 0 to 10, they were at 4 and 4.5. So that is where the preparedness of forensic science and forensic labs is in the country. Point number one. Point number two, we subsequently conducted a training for about 800 doctors who are the frontline people for examining the victim and the accused in rape matters. I was aghast to know that doctors, 75 to 80% of them had no understanding about how to collect specimen from either the victim or the accused suspect in rape matters. Obviously, it shows that forensic science and forensic methods have not got ingrained into our working as it should be. And as Dr. Goswami pointed out in great detail, we have a long way to go. There's no doubt that in the last few years, some emphasis has been given to this by the government of India. But at the state level, we have a very long way to go, not only in terms of our capacity, but equally in terms of our ability to include and incorporate forensic techniques into our investigation. And investigation is a primary job of the state police. And unless the state police kind of adopts this and includes it in its standard operating procedures, we will be lacking in doing our basic duty of fair investigation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goswami, for joining us on this conversation today, and to you, Mr. Ahmad, for all the insights on forensic methods of investigation. I do understand that we have a long way to go, but I think the progress that has been made so far is promising. And as long as we can get the procedural rules regarding admissibility of evidence, the legality of evidence, and quality of evidence sorted, I do think forensic science holds a lot of promise as far as improving our criminal investigation and our criminal trials in the country are concerned. So thank you again for joining me today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.